Hey folks, Nick here from another BookTube channel. Today doing the Stephen King book tag. I was tagged in this by Gareth from Books, Songs, and Other Magic. Thank you, Gareth. These are questions and prompts based on Stephen King, the master of horror. Stephen King is like my first favorite author of all time. I don't know if he still is, but I've definitely read a lot of his books. I wouldn't consider myself to be a super fan the way a lot of his constant readers are. I haven't read every single Stephen King book. I've read a good amount, though. And I'll talk a little bit about them here with these prompts. And we'll go ahead, we'll get started. The first question is, how did you get into reading Stephen King? I started reading Stephen King when I was very young, probably younger than I should have started reading Stephen King, but honestly, like reading is reading. I'm sure my parents like didn't care that I wanted to read it when I was 11. If your child wanted to read 1,000-page like book rather than play video games, even in the 90s, before it was like a much bigger problem, like I don't think you're going to complain. But as for like what drew me to Stephen King, I already liked horror because I grew up on Goosebumps. So I went from Goosebumps, I graduated to Stephen King right after that. And Stephen King was a name that I knew because there were a lot of, like, especially in the 90s, like TV miniseries that were based on his works or that he had written. And I would watch those with my parents as well. So I knew his name from movies and TV. I guess it just kind of evolved into reading his books as well. The second question is, what was the first Stephen King book that you read? I don't remember. It was too long ago, and I was too young to know. I remember the first one I remember reading was It, but I cannot say for sure that that was my first ever Stephen King book. So unfortunately, that knowledge is lost to time. Third question, have you read a Stephen King book published the year that you were born? Yes, I've actually read two because he published two the year I was born. Uh, it was Dark Tower 3, The Wastelands. I was born in 1991. So The Wastelands and Needful Things. And I like both of those books. I'm not a huge Dark Tower fan, but Wastelands is one that I enjoy. That's the one with the train, right? Yeah, I think that's got to be the one with the train. Yeah, I like that one. But Needful Things is actually one of my favorite King books. I think it's very underrated. I've seen a lot of people complain that like it's too long or like the ending is a little unsatisfying. And you know what? I kind of agree with both of those things. But I love the premise and I love the characters that he and I love whenever Stephen King writes a town book. Um, and having that be like the final Castle Rock story. I love the town feeling that he creates in that book. It's really something special. He's just one of the best at doing that type of story. So I love Needful Things. I really do. Next, which of his books do you prefer to collect? I guess what type, like hardcover, paperback, or doesn't matter? To me, I guess it really doesn't matter. I won't buy like he's not an auto buy author for me. Honestly, like I haven't bought a new Stephen King book, like a new release, I think ever, because I read all of his like early stuff, like pre 2000s, and then like after that is when I kind of fell off of him a little bit, and his later stuff I didn't really connect with or didn't really seem too interested in. Uh, so I got like newer books from him as gifts, but I don't really seek them out, and I will just buy a mass market paperback if it's available or trade. If it's an older book that I know I like one of his classics, and I see a nice special edition of it that's not too crazy priced, yeah, I'll grab it. Why not? I like to have a good special edition hardcover or something like that. But as for just something to read, I'm not picky, or maybe rather, I am picky. I don't want to overpay. I don't need the hardcover. I'm okay with just a paperback. Um, 5. How many of his books are on your bookshelf? Let's find out together. Okay, so this is my main Stephen King bookshelf. Counted them up just a moment ago. There's a special edition of Carrie, got Cycle of the Werewolf, It, Long Walk, Dolores Claiborne, Christine, Needful Things, Everything's Eventual. Got the Dark Tower series minus book 8. I've got Misery, another Christine, an older version of Christine, Salem's Lot, Nightmares and Dreamscapes, A Mass Market of Carrie, Night Shift, Pet Cemetery, The Stand, and then the hardcover of the Dark Tower 7 with the Bernie Wrightson illustrations. That's 24. Up here on my rare bookshelf, I got Cujo, Misery, and Night Shift. So that is 27. On a lower shelf, I've got some hardcovers. I've just got The Shining and the first edition of the uncut The Stand. On my graphic novels right here, I've got Creepshow, so we'll call that 30. And then just randomly, I have just The Green Mile on a different bookshelf elsewhere in the house. So that's 31. All right, number 6. Stephen King is known for long, gory novels. Which of his books was tough for you to read? I don't think I've ever had a Stephen King book that was tough for me to read due to like grisly content. I wouldn't classify him as like an extreme horror author by any means. So everything he's written, I think, is pretty ingestible. Yeah, no, I don't think I've ever struggled to read a Stephen King book for those reasons. I've struggled to read Stephen King's books before, but that's because of like not enjoying them. But yeah, his content has never bothered me. Next, have you DNF'd a Stephen King book? Yes, I have, to my previous point. And both of these are going to make Stephen King fans just super angry and very upset. But they are two of his more recent, very long books, 11/22/63 and Under the Dome. Now, I don't know about Under the Dome, but 11/22/63 in particular, a lot of Stephen King fans put that amongst like the best that he's ever written. And I read, I think, half of it, and I got super bored with it. Because if I remember correctly, and this was a really long time ago, this is like when the book first came out. So maybe if I tried it again, I would feel differently. But I remember when it like first came out, I'm reading it, and I really dug the idea of going back in time to stop the JFK assassination. But that book has like a 700-page detour in the middle where the guy has to like test out the time travel first. And so he just goes back in time and just lives a normal life for like a while, for like 700 pages or something. And like that was not what I was there for. It's not what I signed up for. I was like, where is the JFK plot? I don't care about the slice of life stuff. Give me more of what I wanted from this book. And that's not to say that I don't like when Stephen King does slice of life. He's great at that too. He does it in The Stand. There's huge portions of that book that are just like being alive during this post-apocalypse or post-virus. And that stuff I like, but this one just didn't work for me. Maybe I would try it again one day. I will not say that I'll never try it again. But I did DNF it. And I also DNF'd Under the Dome. That one didn't, I didn't like that at all. I read like maybe 100, 150 pages of it. And it just didn't catch me at all. So that one I don't think I'll revisit. All right, next up, 8. Have you read his books in publication order? No. 9. What Stephen King books would you like to read that you haven't read yet? I would like to read Finders Keepers. I guess I want to finish the Bill Hodges trilogy. While I don't read a ton of his newer books, like post 2000 aughts, I did read Mr. Mercedes and liked it a lot. And I just never got around to reading the next ones. So I would like to read Finders Keepers, and then the End of Watch is the third one. I would also like to read Gerald's Game, because I've read Dolores Claiborne, and that one is like a companion book, or sort of, with Gerald's Game. 10. Name a book Stephen King has written that other people liked that you didn't. So this one it's a pretty divisive book. I would say there are definitely people that agree with me, and they're right. They're right to agree with me. But Dark Tower 4, Wizard and Glass, I've seen that's another one where I've seen people call it like amongst Stephen King's best. I hate that book. I hate that book with every fiber of my being. And it's funny, I read The Dark Tower twice, the series all the way through. The first time I read it, I remember kind of liking it. Like I didn't have a huge problem with it, and I got through it fine and then moved on. When I did a reread many years later, kind of a couple years ago, when I got to it, I hated it. I was fuming reading the whole thing. It was slow. It had nothing to do with anything. It's like a 700-page flashback. Just it stops the momentum of the Dark Tower series dead in its tracks. It contributes nothing to the overall story. It builds Roland's character a bit. Did we need it to be that long? Did we need it at all? In my opinion, no. So I hate Wizard and Glass. I hate it. But I understand that is an unpopular opinion. 11. Name a book of his you think is underrated. I mentioned it briefly before. It's not going to be Needful Things, although that one I do think is underrated. But Dolores Claiborne, I think, is very underrated because it's not one of his horror books. It's just an excellent, just like kind of straight drama. And I have a full review of that book on the channel here. But I love Dolores Claiborne as a character. I think she's fantastic and well-rounded and well-written. And I love the fact that the story is told completely from her point of view. It's just she starts talking and then she stops talking when the book is over. It's just straight through, just her relaying her memories to you. And I think it works really, really well. I think it's one of Stephen King's best ones. 12. Which Stephen King character would you like to have dinner with? I'm going to go with John Coffey from The Green Mile because I have like a really sore back and I think that he could probably help me out with that. Like I could probably manipulate the dinner in such a way where like we're having a good time and then I go to stand up or lift something and I go like, ooh, this my back's just there's something wrong with it. The doctors can't help. Maybe John, I mean you can right? You can help me with that? Oh, yeah. Well, and he'd probably do it. He's a pretty nice guy. Has Stephen King inspired you to start reading and writing? I mean, he did when I was younger. Like I said, he's one of my first favorite authors. So his books really kept me going and got me into reading adult books. So yeah, I credit Stephen King with starting me on this lifelong journey that I've been on to be reading. As for writing, no, I can't write. I have no ideas rattling around in this brain. I cannot create. I can only critique. And that's fine. That's completely okay. All right, we're getting to the end here. If you were able to meet Stephen King, what would you say? Oh, I don't know. I'm bad at meeting famous people, even though it was my job for a little while. But I would probably just say, thank you. I would say to him everything that I've told you guys here about how he got me started on reading and how he made me fall in love with reading. And I'm sure he's heard that a million times before, and hopefully he'd be very gracious to hear it again and grateful. But I don't know. I don't have anything to say to him. Maybe I would ask him about the gangbang in It. I would ask him like, hey, what was up with that? Do you regret that? What is your opinion today of that? But no, I don't really have anything else to say to him. Sorry. Next, have you ever been to Bangor, Maine? No. Which do you prefer, his books or his movies? I mean, I'll say his books. I mean, look, there's a lot of Stephen King movies that are great, but he didn't write them, So I'm sure any author, and I've been to like author events where they talk about their books that get adapted, and they say like it doesn't feel like theirs because so many other people touched it that it's no longer really their movie. Like they created the springboard and then 1,000 other people did their own thing with it. But there's some amazing Stephen King movies, which the next prompt will discuss, so I won't go into it much. But I'll say his books because those are purely him. Those are his ideas. It's him unfiltered, and it's that's those are no one else's books but his. But the last prompt is, what are your favorite Stephen King movies? Well, I mean, this is one that Stephen King would really disown, which is The Shining. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it was the movie that made me realize that movies were an art form. Started my love affair with Stanley Kubrick movies. It's great. It's a fantastic movie. Stephen King hates it because it's got nothing to do with his original novel, and that's to my previous point that his movies aren't really his. There are some though that are, I mean, fantastic and stick closer to the source material, like Shawshank Redemption. You can't hate. Green Mile is really good. I would say a one that you don't think about a lot is Gerald's Game, which I mentioned earlier. I think Gerald's Game by Mike Flanagan, who is the best horror director working today, fight me. I think that's maybe his best movie. It's absolutely fantastic, that movie. I love that movie. And something that it's not a movie. It's a TV show, and it's one that Stephen King specifically himself wrote, and that's Storm of the Century. There was a lot of Stephen King miniseries in the '90s and early 2000s. This one, I think, is easily the best one. There was one for The Shining. There was Rose Red. There was Desperation. But Storm of the Century, I didn't watch when I was younger. It was one of the ones I missed. So I have no nostalgia goggles for it. I watched it like last year for the first time, and I was blown away by how impressive it was. Even like with 90s television special effects aside, the story in that one is so strong. It's the perfect blend of like Stephen King characters, that small town feeling. It's like a perfect premise. That's great. If you've got Hulu and you're in the United States, you have to watch Storm of the Century. We're entering the winter months now, so save it for a snowy winter day. It's 3 episodes, like an hour and a half long each. Well worth your time. Great miniseries. And that's it. The last prompt is to tag people. I'll think about some people to tag, and I'll put them in the description below. But if you don't have a channel and you just want to play along, leave in the comments your answers to these questions. The prompts will also be in the description below. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today. But now it's time to get back to reading.